You're listening to the Faith and Other Oddities podcast, brought to you by the Raven Creek Social Club, where we talk about faith and other oddities. For questions, comments, or to be part of the conversation, join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can find us at Raven Creek SC. Now for your hosts, Emily Dixon and Nathan Underwood.
Hey everyone, welcome to Faith and Other Oddities. This week we're doing an interview. We've got Tandy Adams from the After the Music Stops podcast. Some of you may know her from the Worship Leaders Plus group, beloved moderator there. But anyway, Tandy, as many of you know, is a West Texas person, West Texas gal. And so I've been out there a couple times, and one of the things I love about West Texas is the speed limit on the interstate is 80 miles an hour. Like not even, not even the toll road. It's just the interstate. And so West Texas has something else that I'm curious about, and that is the chupacabra. So Tandy, we're going to ask your take on the chupacabra, real, fake? Have you encountered it? What do you got?
Totally real.
It's totally
no doubt
real?
in my mind.
Okay.
Completely real.
Have you
Just
had
have
any?
to be in the right place at the right time.
Okay. Have you had any encounters with it?
Okay, no, I have not, but I do know people that claim they have, and I don't doubt it one bit. When you go out in those mountains down in West Texas, you can find bodies in some places. I am not kidding.
No, I will believe that.
I say all the time, there's probably a dead body over there. There's probably a dead body over there. Yeah. Freaky, funky, and when it's dark, it's dark. So,
And you aren't just blaming it on the Mexican cartel or anything like that.
The speed limit is 85.
What's that?
Do what?
What was the last thing you said?
I said sometimes the speed limit's 85.
I have not seen that. I've only been over, Alpine's a little farther south. I've been over near like Kermit and Odessa, those areas.
Because
it's 80 over there, but
he used to be an escort. So
not that kind of escort, like oversized loads for oil rigs and stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, that is oil country, so.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch out there.
For sure.
So.
Yeah, I totally believe it's real. No doubt in my mind.
Awesome. Well,
I'll tell you about my theory on aliens too someday, but,
Hey, we'll take it. We'll be glad to hear about that. So now, were you born in Alpine?
No, I was born in Fort Worth.
So how did you wind up?
I've always been a Texas. I lived in Mexico for a little while, but mostly Texas.
How did you wind out in the wilds of Alpine?
In Indiana?
Well, in Indiana, too. Well, I actually know that story
in Alpine.
Because I listened to the podcast. But Alpine, how did you wind from, Fort Worth's kind of urban. That's civilized country.
Sure, yeah. So I was born in Fort Worth. My family moved out west, south of Odessa, when I was like in kindergarten. But then I went to college in Brownwood, and then I went to seminary back up in Fort Worth. And because I'm a pastor, my husband's a coach, we kind of lived in a bunch of places. Mostly Central Texas, mostly right around Austin. That's where my son was born.
Okay.
But then Brian got a job coaching in Alpine, so we went west, way west.
Yeah. And for people who have not been spent much time in Texas, that's a big difference going from the hill country down in Austin and all the way out to West Texas. It's like going to a whole nother state.
Yeah, and Alpine's so far from everything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, it is a whole other country. Come on.
Well, that's true.
We are a country. We like to say that. Yeah.
Well, okay. So I've heard a lot of your story on the podcast, or bits and pieces of it. And the first thing that caught my ear that made me go, wait a minute, was Southern Baptist. How did you wind up in a leadership position in the Southern Baptist Church? Because our grandpa was Southern Baptist preacher. We have uncles who are Southern Baptist preacher. Being a woman in leadership, you might as well try to sprout wings and fly. So I want to know how you pulled this off. I knew you were a force of nature right then. So fill us in.
Well, I grew up Southern Baptist. That's all I knew. So I did my undergrad, my degree in theology, at a Texas Baptist university. So Texas Baptists are Southern Baptists, but they're kind of not.
Right.
They're kind of, how Southern Baptists are, So Texas Baptists are much more progressive, and it's all relative, but they're much more progressive than the SBC, I will say. And even when I was in college in the late 80s, early 90s, I had professors my degree was theology. Most of my classes were with men. I took preaching, I took Greek, I took Hebrew, I did all that. My professors were like, yep, go out, go preach, go do it. You can. None of them told me I couldn't. I had grown up in a Southern Baptist church, but it was a small town, and I led as a teenager. My pastor mentor, nobody told me I couldn't. It was never an issue. Till I went to seminary at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary,
mm-hmm.
and was suddenly told, because my degree, I went to get my MDiv, and I was told I couldn't take preaching class, even though I'd had 2 years of it as an undergrad. And even though it was required for my degree, I was not allowed to do that. I had to take speech. So right then I thought, holy crap, what did I get myself into? Nobody up to that point had ever made an issue of my gender at all until I was at seminary. So did my best to just make it through. That's all. That was my only goal. I really only wanted credibility. That's why I went there. And there were no Texas Baptist seminaries at that point.
Right.
So that's what I did. And then I just worked my way through all the Texas Baptist churches that I could find and survived.
Well, that's a testament right there, because I went to seminary too. I have my master's in Bib Lit. And so I didn't go the preaching route.
Mm-hmm.
The seminary I went to was more open to women preachers, but it was actually my degree program where I think I was the only woman that graduated. There was one other in the classes. So very male dominated. Also grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, but we never even considered that women could be anything other than children's minister, women's minister. And how do you feel about being pigeonholed in those kinds of roles as a woman? Is that I'm not going to put words in your mouth, because you don't strike me as the kind of person who's going to go to the scrapbooking meeting and make the...
Oh, I hate them.
I just can't. I can't see you whipping up the next big thing in the crock pot for the potluck. I mean, I'm sure you're more than capable. I'm not. For those of you who can't see, the head
Not
shaking
really.
is going.
Not really.
So tell us,
it's.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say. So when I went into ministry, I went in as knowing that I wanted to work with teenagers. So I knew I wanted to be a youth pastor. And that was a little more acceptable for women. Not as acceptable as a children's minister, of course, but there were still churches who wouldn't have it, who wouldn't have me as a youth pastor. I was told, well, it's a whole other story, but I knew, and I say this all the time, I'm called pastor. I pastor people. That's my heart. That's what I do well. And whether it's teenagers or worship leaders or family ministry like I'm doing now, I don't care what it is. That's my calling. I love to preach. I think I'm pretty good at it. And that's part of my gifting. And so, yeah, it pisses me off to no extent when I hear or listen to people talk about, well, you can go pastor women. Women need pastors too. Well, hell no, that's not what God called me to. That's not, God didn't call me a woman. I mean, not that he doesn't, and not that he can't, and not that there aren't women out there who do that, but that's not my calling. So just because I'm a female, you don't get to tell me what you think my calling is based on my gender. Why do you get to do that? So, yeah. And I don't scrapbook, and I hate women's conferences. Don't even get me started on that. But
can we be best friends now?
Yes.
No, this is something I run into all the time. I knew when God started calling me to do some of the work I'm doing, I actually with women, I'm like, I knew it was God because it was so counter to my personality.
Right.
And so I am so with you on all of this completely. And do you feel, I mean, I know a lot of times, well, I teach, that's mostly, I don't pastor, thank God. I was never called to that. And it's probably a beautiful, wonderful thing for the world. I wasn't. I'm more academic. I teach. I get a lot of my students are 30, 40-year-old men who've been preaching but not had a degree. And I get a lot of the, oh, you cute little thing. How do you handle that?
Right.
How do you handle that when somebody who says, oh, I've been a Christian or a pastor for all my life, and you're just so sweet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and you hear it all the time, right? In my last church, I had a deacon who thought it was appropriate to, make sexual jokes around me. And I get it. We get those things all the time. So I've just learned to give it back. If they call me girl, I'll turn around and call them boy. Don't call me a girl. I'm not a girl. 12. Don't. I'm kind of a smart ass, and I think that serves me well in those situations. And I'm old enough now because I'm 48. I don't really care. I don't really care who I piss off. I don't really care if it makes you uncomfortable if I call you out anymore. Used to I would just go and joke and kind of try to brush it off, but no, now I'm just going to call it what it is, because I think we've let those things happen too much in our churches. We've let men talk to us that way, and we haven't responded correctly. And it's time that we do that. It's time that we just call them out.
Well, and I think we've kind of been groomed to accept that. And if we make a big deal, well, then you're the one who's causing the problem. And so to step up and say, hey, I'm not going to be treated this way, that's a lot of people don't know how to react because they've never had anyone do it before, not even other men. No other men have called out the men who are inappropriate. So I think that being a smartass is something that you almost have to be in order to be a woman in this kind of realm.
Yeah, I was always taught that, I have to lead in a certain way. Like I have to sort of play helpless, get the guys to do what I want. And can you please help me do this? Because I don't know how. But that's how I learned, really, honestly, how I learned to survive in the SBC for 29 years, is kind of being that person. Or in my last church, my pastor was amazing and 100% supported me. Let me preach twice in this church. Never had women preach. But even then, I would have to kind of go through him to get done what I needed done in the church because he was the man. And so I'm in a totally different situation now, which is amazing. And I'm still learning that, oh, wait, I have authority. People, I can just ask, and because I'm who I am, and they will, it's a whole different. But we've learned, we've been programmed, and we've been conditioned to do certain things so that we can lead in these situations that I don't think we have to do. And I think it's really been harmful to women. We haven't learned to find our voice. We've played the helpless female, which, I hate that.
Well, okay, it's bad and harmful for women. What are some ways that you see it as being harmful? Because I've got a whole list, and we can, go into that at some point. But what are some ways that you see this attitude? And not just as women who are in leadership, but just women in general within the church.
How do I see it bad?
How do you see that kind of the poor little helpless woman, women not having authority? How does do you see it affecting women in the body overall? Not just women in the church. I mean,
you're saying not just women in leadership?
Yeah, not just women in leadership.
Kind of in the general congregation?
Yeah,
but the whole church.
Because one of the things... Go ahead.
Well, I just think that it sends a bad message about who we are, right? So we're all created in the image of God, which means we all have gifts. And we talk about how churches don't, 20% of the 80% of the work or whatever. It's because we don't empower people to use their gifts. We don't, and on top of that, we don't empower women to use their gifts unless their gift is nursery. We don't empower it. We don't get up and say, and so how it hurts women is they're not using their gifts in the body. which frustrates them because they're being pigeonholed into these things that fit gender specific roles. And so it frustrates the women. It makes the church weak, and it hurts the kingdom ultimately. And what does it teach our daughters? What does it teach our daughters? Oh, what the gifts God gives men are more important than the gifts God gives women, because men always get to use their gifts, whatever they are, but women might or might not. So it totally plays with our identity and who we are in Christ and how we're created in the image of God. It plays in depression. I mean, we can all those have a ripple down effect.
One of the big things I work with is a lot of women who are in abusive relationships. Usually are there too long because they've been told they need to be submissive. They need to stay in that marriage. They need to not humiliate their husband by outing them. And I think one of the things that happens that I've seen is when there's not a woman in leadership that they can turn to, they wind up feeling like there's nobody who's going to take them seriously. And I think that's the other side of the coin from what I've seen and what I've witnessed. And it's ongoing. And so to hear somebody else saying, hey, I'm seeing this happen. And I've seen women walk away from the church because of that frustration factor.
Yep.
And it's sad. We're losing some really talented and amazing individuals. So did you ever feel tempted to just say, forget it, I'm done?
Oh, yeah. Like 20, 30 times. I don't, many times. I mean, there's more than once there were jobs where they told me, hey, you're great, we love you, we want a man. Or
was that literally was that literally what they said? Like, I'm curious, is like
yeah, literally
straight
it
up
was
said,
what they said.
That's amazing to me. Like, they're just baffling.
Yeah. And I had been on staff at that church for 7 years. And it was just, I was moving up from middle school pastor to the overall pastor. So I'd been there for 7 years, and I had actually been the interim in that position for a year, had men working under me, all that stuff.
Wow.
And grown the youth ministry, grown my volunteer base, and they came back and said, we think you're great, we love your ministry, we love everything you do, but we want a man in that spot. And then they turned around and hired a man who had no experience, didn't even have a bachelor's degree, but they lacked him. And they said, we're not really worried about all that because we figure you can train him.
Wow.
Where are the bodies? Do we?
With the chupacabra.
So I'm not good enough to do the job, but I can train the guy who does the job.
That's just.
I tried. I stayed for a year. I tried, but
that's probably going above and beyond. Wow.
That's incredible.
Because I've actually hit some of those situations myself where yes, we want a man, and I was interviewed so they could say they interviewed a woman. So, and I'm like you, I've got the degrees.
Exactly. Yeah, you're the token female.
I won't go there.
Yeah, that's not the only time that's happened, but that's the best. That's the best story. It's not the only one, unfortunately, but yeah, it happens. And men especially I think men in complementarian churches and who've grown up complementarian, they don't see that. And I can't so much blame them, really. So I'll make sure that they understand that it happens. They've never heard of it because they've lived in their little complementarian bubble. So a lot of my outrage on Facebook and things like that is because I think these men just don't know that actually happens. Like, do you know actually that men have walked up to women pastors and said, oh, you're so cute, and slapped you on the butt? Do you know that happens? Men don't know that. And I think a lot of us need to know that when they find out. Most of them are appalled. But
I've heard women,
they're normal.
Yeah, I've heard women deny that this stuff goes on. And, I was approached by two of my profs in seminary. They were married. I was single, but, their wives were out of town. And to tell people that this happens in the church, they freak out. And it's trying to convince people this does go on in the church because women are trained to be silent, even when they need to be speaking up.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Well, and I had a friend who.
Well, I've said this.
I had a friend who was involved in a large
No, go ahead.
a large church in Texas, around the Dallas area, and the pastor was very much against starting any kind of women's Bible study group, and just wouldn't allow it. And then come to find out, the reason he wouldn't allow it is because he was sleeping with 20 of the women, but they were all being told to sit down and behave, and didn't he didn't want them all getting in and telling on him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've said this before, and maybe I'm being extreme, maybe I'm not, but I was in seminary when the conservative resurgence took over the SBC. I watched it happen. I watched them clear seminaries out of, get rid of professors who were women or who supported women. I watched all that happen. And I said then, this is not going to end wealthy. It's just it's that time. The degree, the severity of the complementarianism, and I want to say the toxicity of it, because is that what we're talking about? Anyway, it's very toxic. I'll say that. That has grown since then. It's not done. It's worse, which was why I had to get out of the SBC,
Tandy,
because I finally realized this is not better. Yeah.
Could you repeat that last little bit? Because our connection got kind of bad for a second. I couldn't hear the last probably like paragraph or so.
Oh, I just said I knew that this was not going to be better. This was not going to be good for me. And things have gotten worse and not better, which was my whole reasoning for leaving the SBC. It's become worse and worse and worse.
Right.
Worse. They've dug them and it leads to abuse.
Right.
There's no other way to say it. We can look at what's happened with Paige Patterson, with the whole, we can look at all of that, and I'll trace it back to complementarianism every time.
Right.
Well, and especially
because you've taught women to be quiet.
Well,
we've taught women to be submissive.
We grew up in a home where very complementarian, but that was also my parents' personality. And it worked very well for them. Mm-hmm. And so when you add that background, I mean, they were devoted to each other and they both treated each other very well. But when you add that background to this kind of training and teaching in the church, what you wind up with, like you're saying, is toxic. And it does lead to abuse. Mm-hmm. And it leads to abuse not only within the church, within the marriages, and then they become kind of this self-feeding cycle that just, the self-perpetuating cycle.
Right.
And it's... Yeah. So when you start to talk to people about this who have grown up or been trained in this complementarian idea, how do you engage? What's the best strategy you found for kind of opening their eyes? Do you have a zinger? Do you have a, or you just punch them?
Punching is always fun. I enjoy that.
I knew that.
Yeah, people, windows, doors, whatever. One thing I've tried to remember, I'm very passionate about this, and I'm not very good at self-control. Things just come out of my mouth or onto my Facebook, and it just happens. I try. I understand that's part of the fruit of the Spirit, but I'm just terrible at it. But one thing I have learned is that people will not change their mind in this area unless they know and love and respect somebody who walks this out every day.
Right.
Just like that, you may be familiar with my story of Mildred. It's the same thing. I loved her enough. She hated me, told me she'd walk out if I preached. I'll walk out if you preach, Tandy. I'll do it. And I loved on her enough that when I did preach, she called my pastor the next day and said, Tandy was so good. And she cried when I moved. But you have to walk, you change it one person at a time. And it has to be through relationship. That's the only way they change their mind, is they have to know you, love you, and respect you. So I can spout off all the theology and the exegesis and all that and argue with people all day. And I'm not against that either. I do that as well. But it doesn't work.
Right.
If I want to change their idea about women pastors, then I need to be a female pastor they can respect.
So, how surprised are people when you do go into the theology and the exegesis and actually make sense?
Well, you know, by that point, generally it's more heated. Generally, yeah, I think it depends. People in the worship leader group, I think they all know me well enough to know that I'm I'm fairly educated. I kind of know what I'm. Not that I get it right all the time because I don't, but in other groups, it's really fun to watch. Like I got kicked out of 3 or 4 Facebook groups that were Baptist Reformed people, but they were shocked because my name and my name, email. A lot of people think I'm a guy on Facebook, which sort of helps me out sometimes because they'll listen until they find out, right? And then when they find out that it's a female, then they want to argue. Then they want to disregard what I say. Then they want to push back against everything. So
I actually binge. I had to listen to After the Music Stops, y'all's podcast, because Nathan's actually the musical one. I didn't inherit any of that at all. And so he's part of the worship leaders group, so I haven't got to see that side of you. So what I know strictly comes from the podcast. And what I love about you is you're with these 2 guys, and you're just, you're right there with them. And it doesn't matter whether they're talking sports. I think the only place I saw you kind of back away with some of the sci-fi movies and things like that, but you still kind of held your own even in that arena. And when they were, talk theology, you don't cut them any slack. You make them work for it. And
No.
I think that's great.
No, yeah. Well, it's great, but then even when I'm wrong, I just keep arguing like I'm right, and afterwards I think, well, I shouldn't have said that. That was stupid. Why did I say that? But yeah, sometimes I just argue because I can.
But you can all still be friends.
I don't know Star Wars movies very well, so.
Yeah, see, and that's where we differ. Like you're a much bigger sports fan than I am. I'm like sci-fi, comic books, all that stuff. But yeah, when it comes to sports, I'm just like, I don't know. There's a ball, and people care about where it's located on the XY axis.
Well, that's pretty much Connor too. And really, I know sports, but I don't care about any except for baseball.
Sure.
And I'll talk that all day.
Now, I did used to play baseball when I was young, and I played for 2 or 3 seasons. I can't remember, but long enough to figure out that I am not good at throwing, catching, hitting, or running, and so. That,
But okay, now he brought it up, so I have to tell the story. He asked me to practice with him because I'm the big sister. This is what we do. And I'm out there throwing the baseball, and he says, quote, "You throw like a girl."
Did I say that?
Yes, you did.
I have no idea.
Honestly, you were probably, what, 7?
Maybe, if that, maybe. I don't know. I just remember not liking it. I'm out here, it's hot. There's nothing to do. I was out in.
Well, I grew up in Texas, so
right field. Yeah,
it's all football all the time in Texas. So I could coach football. I just don't really like it. And my husband's a coach, so sports are kind of a thing.
Yeah, you have to like sports to survive. I think probably when you're married to a coach. I can't imagine not.
Yeah, so and you live in the Tahlequah, Muskogee area. I live in Norman, and so it's all football all the time here. And and me and my wife, we keep track of the football schedule so we know when not to leave the house. Like, because on game day, it's just so congested. It's like, make sure you've got your rations, and you'll be fine.
Yep. Yes, that sounds right. That I hear that basketball in Indiana is a big thing. But so our worship leader at my church is from Texas as well, also an ex-Baptist. But he's been here 4 years. But he told me, he said, Tandy, they like to think basketball's a thing. And maybe to them it is a big thing, but it is nothing like football in Texas. I said, okay.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because OU got such a big sports-minded. They're so like Oklahoma City, Norman area. Oklahoma is so into college football that like the Thunder, when they came in, like they're celebrating the Thunder games the same way that they would like a college team, and it's just
Oh yeah.
It's amazing. Like when when they went to the playoffs, was it 2 years ago? There was, and this is, I don't know much, but like the last game was an away game and they lost. Like they didn't win the championship, but when they got back, like there was a huge crowd of people with signs talking about, oh, we love, how much they love the Thunder. Greeted them when they got off the plane. I mean, you would have thought the guys won the championship, but
Yeah.
it was amazing. Yeah, so that's how this area is.
Well, Texas OU weekend is a big deal. It's like a holiday.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
for sure.
And I actually, when I lived in Dallas for 3 years, and one time I said OU Texas weekend, and my roommate said, "What?" I said, "OU Texas weekend." He's like, "No, it's Texas OU
No,
weekend."
it's Texas OU.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that
So if
that
here
gets
they
crowded.
keep talking about you, they'll say things about UT football or UT whatever, and I'm thinking, you guys follow Texas football? That's fabulous. But they mean Tennessee apparently.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know. There's there's a university in Tennessee, and it's called UT or something.
I'm sorry. I was like, there's a university in Tennessee. Like, there is actually. Sorry.
I'm learning so much in the Midwest. I didn't know that Indiana and Illinois were right next to each other until I moved here.
Okay. Did you get the? Did you get the heater in your car fixed? That's what I was concerned about.
No, not yet. And my little heated cushion that I bought that plugs into my lighter thing, it quit working yesterday. So I'm like, well, crap. That was my only source of heat in this car.
Yeah,
I got to get it fixed.
You'll want to get that fixed, but yeah.
I was listening to the episode and I was cringing for you. I just the whole time just cringing.
Yeah, because see, Emily and I don't do cold.
I'm really cheap. That's my problem. So I'm trying to decide if I should spend money to fix. I mean, my car is a 99. It's almost 20 years old. So should I spend the money to fix the heater in a 20-year-old car that has 200,000 miles in it, or should I buy a new car?
Is it a Toyota? That's
but
the
I don't
question.
want a It's a Jeep. It's a Jeep, and it's four-wheel drive, and it's been all over the mountains.
No.
I love my Jeep.
I'm a Toyota fan.
That's my dilemma.
I can actually understand that. I'm driving my dad's old beat up truck right now, and it's like there's so much sentimental value in it, but the doors don't lock, and if you turn the air conditioner on, you can't go uphill more than 40 miles an hour. But it was dad's,
right?
So
yeah.
And
I'm cheap. I don't want a car payment. So
I hear ya. Oh, I know we kind of get sidetracked there because but I think that's good. I think a lot of times when people are in leadership, sometimes those on the outside forget that we're just folks. That we like sports. Y'all like sports. You can have it. But we have car problems and things like that. And do you think that being a woman actually allows you to relate in ways that male leadership wouldn't?
I don't know if it's a female characteristic or not. I'm very relational in everything I do. And so I can sit down with a mad or an upset church member, and in an hour and a half we can be friends. Like I can make that happen. And I don't know if that's a female thing or if that's actually, honestly, if that's part of the gifting of a pastor, if that's my personality, because I'm an extrovert. I want to be around people.
Never would have guessed.
And so, yeah, right. So I don't know if I hesitate to say it's a female thing because I don't think it is. I think it's more of a gifting than anything.
I can actually see that. I think most of the women in church leadership, whether it's pastoring, whatever level, they kind of all have that same quality. And I think because I did grow up with a hardcore Southern Baptist grandpa, that how many nights did we sit around and listen to people scream about the Bible in the living room?
Oh man, yeah. Well, and the thing is that was actually one of the things. Because see, and that's the thing. Like I think you might have had a different experience with pastors growing up because in a lot of the Oklahoma, the small town Oklahoma churches, you didn't really have pastors who really seemed to have that caring, connective quality. It was very much about authority and leadership with them. And I think that might have something to do with, soteriology, but I don't know if I want to get on that bus. But, but it very much was, you often didn't talk to them. Like you might start into what a problem might be, and then you would get a sermon. You wouldn't actually get a conversation. And so that was very much our experience, was the pastors were very disconnected from what was actually right in front of them.
Yeah, it was for me too growing up. And I think that I think the church has evolved in a way that is beneficial, in that we've started to understand that for leaders to show transparency and vulnerability and kind of a realness is okay. The same way growing up SBC, the pastor was this authority figure, and really, if you had a problem, you wouldn't go to him because you didn't really know him. Even in a small church, you didn't know him. You knew what you saw on Sunday morning, but you didn't hang out with the guy.
Right.
And in the Southern Baptist culture too, pastors are kind of taught to pull back and to not get that involved. At least they were. I think that's changing again. I think it's evolving in a good way. But there are many times when I've stood up to lead worship, or the year that I was the interim senior pastor, I'd stand up to preach, and I would say, "Y'all, I had a sucky week. Like, I blew it 5 or 6 times this week." But I think that transparency is good, and I think it's helpful. And I think that churches are understanding that, and they're starting to understand the value of the relationship as opposed to this is what is right, just go do it.
Right.
And I think pastors need that just as much as the congregation needs it from them. I think
right.
It's a two-way street there.
Yeah, because I know I read an article. A lot of pastors, do tend to feel isolated because of that old kind of outlook. Where you're the guy in charge, you're distant, and so they feel isolated, and so there's a high degree of depression, quick. I don't want to say mortality rate, but what's it called when they don't stay in a profession very long? It's
quick
not turnover. Things like that just really tend to get to people. I mean, I was at a church. I was at a church. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No,
There's a lag here.
Yeah, we got a little bit of time delay. No, I was gonna say, I was at a church once, and the pastor was announcing that he was moving on to another job, and the guy seemed he looked really young, but apparently he'd been the pastor of this church for 11 years. And I'm going, man, 11 years. I mean, that must have been like the best position in the world, because you almost never hear of pastors staying, even pastors who plant churches, you almost never hear of them staying 11 years anywhere.
Yeah. No. And I think we put pressure on ourselves, maybe that isn't even there, to project this image of we're perfect, or we don't have any problems, or we've got it all together.
Right.
We think we have to be that person for the church. Whereas, I decided I'm too old for most of that. But when they hired me here, I'm like, this is what you get. I'm tapped up. I drink a little. I'm a Southern Baptist, and I pray in tongues. So what do you want? Here I am. Do you want me or not?
Do you feel how has it hit you as far as being a woman, and has it changed over your years of ministry? Do you feel like there is pressure for you to look a certain way, to act a certain way, just because? I mean, like, when I say that, I'm thinking hair, makeup, the nails. I mean, I'm looking at the tattoos on your arm. I'm loving it. And I'm thinking, you joined us tonight with the hair up in this sloppy bun, and you got the hoodie on. So you're pretty comfortable with yourself. But do you ever find that's actually to your detriment in certain social circles in the church?
So maybe, I guess it would depend on your role. My role as a family pastor, I don't think so. And I will tell you, sometimes this is how I go to work. I very easily could wear a hoodie and my hair up in a bun, and nobody would be shocked. The other day I had on my ripped jeans and my flannel shirt, and so I don't feel any pressure. But again, I'm kind of a rebel, and I'm just going to kind of do what I do. When Pastor Jen started, she's my first female pastor I've ever had in my life. Didn't know what to expect, and so Jen wears heels and a skirt every day. And so after about a month, I finally said, I'm going to have to up my game, because look at you every day and look at me every day. And she goes, no, you don't. Just be who you are. And I wear jeans to church on Sunday morning. Rarely. I wore a dress last week, and everybody was like, Tandy's in a dress. Tandy's wearing a dress. And the only reason I have to do part of this service, and I wear a wireless mic, so I need somewhere to put the pack. That's where I wear jeans. Like, I have pockets. I need pockets.
Yep.
And they do not make women's clothing with pockets.
No, and it's impossible otherwise. So I feel no pressure to be a certain way, or dress a certain way, or look a certain way. I'm not girly, really, but I do like my makeup. I have no nails because I play the guitar. So, I just do what I do. But I'm not the senior pastor. Maybe if I was the senior pastor, I would feel a different kind of pressure. I don't think so, but maybe.
Okay, so one of the things I noticed about you right off is you are that rebel, and you're very comfortable with yourself, and you're comfortable to say what you're thinking. Where did that come from?
I don't know, actually. I think I've been this way my whole life.
Your poor mama.
Yes. My parents used to always tell me I should be a lawyer, because I like to argue quite a bit. I think I think really I kind of developed that in college. Most of the classes, I was the only female, and I was with a bunch of guys. And so I just kind of developed this, I'm not going to be the stereotypical female. I just wasn't going to be that person. And so maybe it came from there. But I was a terrible teenager. I was a rebel at all stages of my life. So I don't know. I think I was just born that way.
Were people surprised when this rebel teenager said, hey, I'm going to seminary?
Yes, they were. They were surprised when I went. Yeah, they were surprised. My ministry career actually started at 18. And the day after, well, this will tell you how I am. The day after I graduated from high school, I packed my car and I drove to Mexico. And I did youth ministry in Mexico for the summer. Didn't speak the language. Didn't sleep on a dirt floor in a house with no electricity, no running water, and just did youth ministry for a summer. And then I went, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this the rest of my life. This is what God's called me to. And then I went to college and went to a seminary. And so when I told people I'm just going to pack my Jeep and move to Indiana, people who knew me weren't really surprised.
Right.
They were like, yeah, sounds about right. Do you have a place to live, Tandy? Nope. Just gonna pack my Jeep and go to Indiana. Okay.
Yeah. I did some moving like that when I was younger. Like, yeah, time to go to Norman. I'm going to help out with this church. Do you know what you're doing? Not at all. Here we go.
Yeah, that was me. We moved in the Jeep with like my guitar, some books, and some clothes, and thought, okay, we'll figure it out when we get there.
I love that, because typically when I talk to women, and maybe it's because of the area we're from, women in ministry, I ask them, I say, what was it like for you? And they always tell me I ran the opposite direction. I spent my time in the whale's belly before I came back around to God. And so I love the fact that it's like, oh, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And that it wasn't this huge trauma that brought you back to a place of service for him.
No.
That's just...
Yeah, no, I've known since I was 18. I knew that at 18 God called me to ministry, and I thought I'm just going to go do that. And again, in my church and in my college, nobody told me I couldn't. Nobody ever said, oh, you're a female, you can't do that. I never heard that. So I just assumed you could do it.
See, my experience was it was so far out of the realm of possibility. I was never told you couldn't do that because you just didn't talk about things that were impossible. And so I knew I was reading Grandpa's, you'll remember the commentaries that were on I was reading my grandpa's Bible commentaries. Yeah, throw it out. It's horrible. Anyway, and I was told to put it back. Girls didn't need to be reading that. So I grew up
Wow.
with that. Yeah, very. But of course, I was kind of the troublemaker along the lines of I wanted to know, who did Cain marry? I wanted to know, did
Yeah.
Adam and
Right.
Eve have belly buttons? I wanted to know all the stuff. So,
Right.
and the people in the church, like, sit down, shut up. And they actually put me in charge of the 3 and 4-year-olds on Wednesday nights to keep me out of the youth group so I wouldn't ask questions to drive people crazy. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anytime I hear a woman who's like, "Oh, I just went for it," that to me, that's insanity. That just almost doesn't make sense in my head. So,
But it's
Yeah.
encouraging, right?
no, it is that there are places that women can actually say, "This is my gifting." Because when I went to seminary, the other thing, my grandpa had a family meeting. I'm told, to talk about disowning me. And I wasn't even going to
Wow.
seminary to become a pastor. That was never my goal. I just wanted to know the Hebrew and Greek. That was it. But
Wow.
yeah. So when I hear these stories where you just kind of get to roll with it and nobody bucks you, that's huge to me. That there's it's like,
Yeah.
where's this
Yeah.
utopia?
Nobody did till I got to seminary. But yeah, it was. I'm thankful for the pastor I had as a teenager. Again, I was very rebellious for a few years. And when I came back to Jesus, the pastor who was there to help me through that was he did nothing but encourage my calls and my calling and my gifting and he licensed me to ministry. Baptist churches didn't do that with women back in the day very much. So
I don't know any in my area that do, even to this day. I actually have a couple of pastor friends who were part of the Ministerial Alliance in a town close where I live. And in order to keep the women from being on the stage with the pulpit, they moved the meeting to the basement just because the women
Oh
were leading.
my.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And this has happened within the last 3 years, 4 years maybe.
Wow.
So,
I don't think I even heard that story.
yeah. And so, yeah. And what kind of slap in the, I mean, was it a slap in the face
Wow.
when you got to college and you started in seminary and you started hearing people saying you shouldn't do this? Did that
Mhm.
shake you up, Benny? Did it, I mean, how did you deal with that?
No, it didn't. Actually, it pissed me off. So then I went into, oh yeah, I'll show you mode. And that's probably what propelled me through half of my years in the SBC is, really, you think I can't? Well, I'll show you. And again, I'm kind of a rebel. So it didn't make me. Now, I'm not going to say that, when you hear enough, when you hear over and over enough that you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, and you hear that message so many times, of course, at some point you start to doubt. I've never doubted my calling. I've doubted my ability. And because what I hear when people say you can't do this is you're not capable.
Uh-huh.
You're not good enough. And I think what maybe men don't understand is when they say that to women that you can't do this, the message we hear is you're not good enough, and it eats at us. It does me. And it would eat at me. That idea of not being good enough would eat at me, which would propel me to try to prove that I was good enough,
Right.
So I spent all those years trying to prove that I'm good enough. And it's been funny here because Pastor Jen, man, she nailed me with that early on and said, you don't have to prove anything here. You don't have to prove yourself. You're good enough. We called you. We hired you. The church loves you. You're good enough. You have authority. Go lead. You don't have to prove yourself.
Now, is that the best thing you ever heard or the scariest thing you ever heard?
Kind of both, because yeah, it's weird here, in so many ways, because I'm just not used to having this kind of authority. And I don't mean authority in a bad way, but just authority to lead and go, what do you want to do? You want to change up everything? Okay, we'll go with you. Tell us what to do. What do you need, Tandy? I'm not used to that. Jen has called me out on many things. I would send even little things like the way I speak to men in emails. We had an email chain one time, and she emailed me privately, and she said, "See what you did there? You apologized for yourself. You don't need to do that." Why are you apologizing for yourself? You tell them what you want. You have authority. Quit doing that. So, yeah, it's a little bit, it freaks me out some days, actually, but it's kind of cool. I really have really enjoyed that.
Oh, that is cool. Well, we've talked a lot about kind of the challenges and things like that. What in your time in ministry, what to you have been some of your more rewarding moments?
Oh, man. So I think I alluded, or maybe I said this a while ago. I got to be an interim senior pastor for a year, and that was a blast because I got to preach every week. But I didn't really have all the pastoral responsibilities because I was just the interim. So it was a lot of fun. I just got to get up and preach, and I was the worship leader at that church when the pastor left, and they said, "We want you to be the senior pastor." And I said, "I can't do both. Like, I'm not going to be the worship leader and the senior pastor, so pick one. What do you want me to do?" And they said the senior pastor, and I've always said either I was a really kind of sucky worship leader or they liked my preaching. I'm not sure which, but I enjoyed that quite a bit. That was a win. I did something that's been a while back with teenagers in the city, and rented out an old warehouse and would meet with them once a month with all the area teenagers who just hung out around the warehouse.
Uh-huh.
Very cool because I got to meet kids who didn't come to church, kids who didn't know Jesus, kids and got to hang out and develop relationships, and eventually had a few coming to church. So that's one of my really fun things that I like. For me, everything fun is relational in some way.
Yeah. Now you said you rented a warehouse space, like you rented it once a month, or you rented it and then had a meeting there once a month. Like, did you have
I rented
a
it
lease
once a
on?
month.
Oh, okay. So it was by the day, not like a permanent space.
No, yeah, no. I just rented it once a month.
Okay.
And then of course I did church in the bar, and that was really fun. I enjoyed church in the bar quite a bit.
Now, I was a bartender my final semester of seminary, actually, and could have got kicked out. But I am convinced that every bar should be owned by Christians because people are there looking for one thing. And it may take many different forms, but they're looking for a relationship. And so that might look like watching a game. It might look like a one-night stand. It might look like pouring your heart out to the bartender. But really, it's just that relationship. So, yes, I'm with you. Church and a bar and, being Southern Baptist. Oh, no. So, cue the shock and awe.
Well, what's really funny, church in the bar was actually funded by the Baptist General Convention of Texas.
Sweet.
That's cool.
With me as the lead pastor.
Nice.
Yeah.
How did you manage?
So
See, okay, there's why you blow my mind. Because I'm still sitting here going, Southern Baptists do not do this. You don't even talk about alcohol. You don't talk about women pastors. And so, so I'm, like I said, force of nature right here. So
I just had an idea and thought it would be a good one. And I'm like, we should have a church in a bar. God showed me this bar. I think we should do it. And I talked to the guy who owned the bar. This is really a cool story because I talked to the guy who owned the bar and I said, hey, we'll rent this from you. We'll rent this bar from you once a week if you'll let us come do church here. And he goes, I bought this bar 2 years ago and my family thought I was crazy because I don't drink. He said, I don't drink at all. He said, I really didn't even know why I bought the bar. He said, now I know. It's because church needs to happen in this bar. Yeah, right?
That's awesome.
So I went to the convention and I said, hey, let's do church in the bar. That's where everybody is. Nobody's coming to our churches, but they're all in the bar. Let's just go there. The convention said, okay. It was a total God thing because, Southern Baptist, alcohol, women, it's just doesn't mix very well.
Okay, now I want to hear like what typically was a church in the bar service. Did you meet on Sundays? Did you serve alcohol? What did it all look like?
Well, so that was the one exception I had to make was that I was not allowed to drink, while we were there. And anybody in leadership from the church wasn't allowed to drink.
Right.
But, the alcohol, the bar was open. So people would grab their we didn't go after hours.
Okay.
Originally they had wanted me to do it after hours, and I said, what's the point in that? Let's do it while they're there. So the bar was open. They could get alcohol, and then they did, and sit down, and there was a stage, and it just depended. We would meet on like Tuesday nights. And so I would either bring some musicians from the church, or we would bring some just secular musicians, but somebody would play music on the stage. And sometimes it was worship. And then, we sat around tables and opened the Bible and talked about Jesus, talked about life, talked about, had some prayer, those kind of things.
That's awesome.
It was beautiful.
I love it.
Yeah. That's probably my favorite thing I've done in ministry.
Well, that's cool. It sounds like a good high note to wrap up on. We're coming up on time, unfortunately, because it's been a good conversation. And but Tandy, before we head out, I want you to tell everyone where they can find any projects you're involved with after the music stops, anything like that.
Josh is going to kill me after the music stops. I'm assuming we have a website. I was told we have a website.
Should I Google that? So,
we might have a website.
I know you can look up just after the music stops on iTunes and find it.
Yeah.
And any place else we can find and connect with you.
We're on iTunes, Facebook, or you can learn, because I don't, unless you really, that's where my church people aren't. So
right.
I put a lot of stuff on Twitter that might be questionable. Yeah. No, you can follow me on Twitter or Facebook or after the music stops on iTunes, and it's on something else. What else? What other format it's on?
Are you on Stitcher?
Josh is going to shoot me because I don't know this. Huh?
We won't tell him.
It's okay. To have Josh, I'll send you my email address. Have Josh email me all the information. We'll put it in the show notes. Make sure everyone can get to it.
Great idea. Let's do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to have him on sometime too, and we can, he can tell us how all this goes.
Yeah. He's up with a mic, and even the mic. Josh bought the mic and had it shipped to me because I didn't even have that. But.
Well, that's kind of my role in all of this. Nathan handles all the technical, and I don't think it's just a girl thing. It's just no. I'm doing content. I'm doing research, so that's my excuse.
I do some research.
There you go.
So, well, Tandy.
Yeah, I don't even do research.
Oh, I'll say. We both love doing research. It just depends on the topics. Just depending on which week. Sometimes Emily will take the lead, and sometimes I will. But anyway, well, Tandy, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
And if all of you out there watching the show, hit subscribe if you like it. If you really like it, write us a review on iTunes. If you really, really like it, hit us up on Patreon, which we'll be launching soon at Raven Creek SC, and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Raven Creek SC, you'll find us there. So thanks for listening. Bye.
You've been listening to the Faith and Other Oddities podcast, a Raven Creek Social Club production. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you like what you've heard, please write us a review on iTunes or consider supporting us on patreon.com/RavenCreekSC. As always, thank you for listening, and don't forget to join us next week.